The Oriolus Monachaa. Let's talk about it. Now, this is the second IEM that I've reviewed from Oriolus, and I kind of forgot about the first one. But this is a interesting 4 dynamic driver IEM that costs $2,000. I got this a part of the HeadFi water cooler thread that they sometimes tour products to kind of show them to people and kind of see what people think of them. So let's start by talking about the build quality of this expensive, gorgeous IEM, and then go from there. I like the design of these shells. I think they're very pretty. I like the purple and gold. Kind of remember the University of Washington Huskies, one of my favorite football teams. So, it's kind of fun. I mean, if you look at the design of the shell, I mean, it's okay. It's kind of a long nozzle rather than being short. Kind of reminds me of the Isabella a little bit in some regards. But it is kind of an interesting fit shell, but it does work for me and I have no major fault with it. It doesn't have a wing, but it does have kind of a nice nozzle. It's all 100% resin based, so it's not super exciting. It is a recessed 2-pin cable connector. Again, not a super impressive shell, but it's fair and acceptable and it's comfortable. The cable, it feels kind of papery, but it does kind of have a nice fit to it. The chin slider doesn't move. It does have a 4.4 connector to it, which is pretty common at this price point. I mean, it's overall just kind of an okay cable. It feels really nice in hand and it feels durable, but it doesn't feel overly excessive or shocking for what it is. It does have a really cool case with it, with kind of a nice texture and a feel to it. Has kind of this red divider that kind of comes in here. I'll show it to you in just a second. Here we go. I mean, again, it's well packaged and it looks nice, but again, this is a tour, so we don't get everything, but I wanted to show you everything that we did have. Now, this is an interesting IEM. I've done a lot of tip rolling. I've done even some cable rolling, some amp rolling, but with all my testing, it's been kind of interesting. It's one of those IEMs that sort of lacks impressive anything. And it's hard sometimes to explain these IEMs to other people, so I'm going to do the best that I can to talk about it. I guess what I'm kind of saying is if I listen to this IEM in a store, I probably would pass on it. Now that I've had it in home for a while, I would definitely pass on it. And it's just, it's not for me. Listening to my tracks like The Marriage of Figaro, it's very poor in the strings. It's lifeless. It's drab. O Mio Babino Caro, the vocals are kind of mid but decent. In other tracks, it kind of gets better, but like the drums attacks in Iron Man just feel poor. It feels like it lacks in too many areas to really be prominent and exciting, and that's kind of my problem with it. So let's look at some graphs, and then we'll kind of go from there. First of all, I wanted to show you a listing of this IEM that I thought was interesting. Like now it's going for $1,140, which kind of is interesting after only 4 to 6 months being out, that it's already kind of dipped in price significantly. Just an interesting thing to know of what something goes on the used market. I would encourage you guys to kind of follow the used market when you can to kind of get an idea of whether IEMs have sustaining power, or sometimes they just kind of fall off really quickly. Just something to note, something to look at. Now, the overall graph is not bad. It does have a little bit of recessed mids right here. So if we normalize this actually at 500, depending on what we're actually looking at now, you can tell that it kind of has a lot of bass, has a lot of 1K region. So again, one thing to note when you guys do look at graphs, try to make sure they're normalized at 500 or whatever you're used to. I try to normalize at 500, but sometimes we forget, and I wanted to show that. What do you notice when it's normalized at 500? I mean, it has a lot of bass. That's not bad, but it's not everything. It has a ton of 1K region, which is something I'm very sensitive to. It has a ton of 4K region, has a ton of 8K, and a ton of this region right here. Usually I like a lot of like 15 to 20K, a little bit less of this 12K peak. It just affects timbre and tonality, and for me, the overall tone of this IEM doesn't really work for me in the state that it is, and I just wasn't a super big fan of it. So let's look at some other graphs and kind of go from there. Something from the same brand, the Isabella. I kind of like the Isabella. It was just a little bit more mellow. I mean, less of that 12K peak. Its bass shelf, I mean, it looks like the one on the Monachaa would be better. It doesn't have that 1K peak, so I like the upper mids of the Isabella better. It's just more smooth, more fun, more my take on something that I would actually enjoy and listen to. So just something I kind of want to share you, and you see some DNA and some tiny similarities between these two. Just something to know. I mean, for me, when you get an IEM like this, there's a lot of other IEMs out there. Like something like the Kiwi Ears 4 exists, as that's a really smooth tune with really flat mids, and I think that's something to kind of remember, that the Kiwi Ears 4 exists and is really smooth and relaxing, and that should be a good baseline for a lot of people. I'm hoping that someday a cheaper baseline comes out, but when I compare stuff, I have to look at it like, how do I compare to the Kiwi Ears 4? Is it something that would really jive with me? Do I want to listen to stuff on it? And unfortunately, I don't. Look at other stuff like the custom art for Bray. I kind of like the custom art for Bray. It had really nice flat mids. It had some issues up here, but I think the Oriolus just kind of does some weird things with timbre and texture, and it's not really something that I would recommend or enjoy myself. Something this did remind me of a little bit was the Buddha Store, but if you'll notice about the Buddha Store is that it has good upper mids, a little bit rolled off bass, has that kind of 1K peak that I'm not a huge fan of. I think kind of overall the Buddha Store would be something that I kind of would recommend over the Oriolus, but you can kind of tell at that 1K peak, it just kind of reminded me of each other. And the Buddha Store is like I don't know, it's like $500 IEM versus a $2,000 IEM. Just something to note. Another one to note, kind of a unusual one, is the Orivetti. Again, I like the Orivetti. Let's look at this actually normalized at 500. And what you'll notice is that, the Monachaa has a lot of bass, but is it good bass? It has a lot of energy at 1K, a lot of energy at 4K, and just kind of does some odd things. So I wanted to kind of share that with you guys so you could kind of see some things about it. Let's rank this thing up. I did not like this set very much. It had really weird kind of bass, really weird mids and highs, and just overall its tone didn't work for what I wanted. It just felt kind of boring. As far as like image, it didn't image very well. It wasn't very clean or crispy. It just felt kind of drab and kind of fuzzy. It did have pretty nice slam and no weight, but nothing exceptional, nothing stupendous, and was just something that I feel was passable. It didn't have this wide open soundstage, and its resolution wasn't great at all. I think for $2,000, it should wow you. And it should be something that you really like. It should be something that you go, that pays for a trip to like Can Jam or something else, and so you can spend that money and go and do something and try 100 IEMs and then buy the one you want, rather than spend that kind of money on it. So that's kind of my concern with it. I don't think it's a bad IEM, but it wasn't something that I would vibe with and something that I would really recommend for my time that I got to experience it. This is a funny hobby. We sit here, we get to sometimes listen to these amazing, beautiful sets, and sometimes they work for us and sometimes they don't. I know there's a lot of people out here that do like this set, but for me, I just find this a little bit middling and not super exciting. I feel like there's other sets, even from the same brand, that are better, despite it having a lot of positives like this shell. I mean, look at that shell. It's gorgeous. So again, I do recommend that you guys try this in person, and if you like it in person, maybe consider buying it. But for me, it's a no-go. Thanks for watching my silly little video. Hope you guys have a great day, and hope we catch you again. Bye-bye. You're still here. It's over. Go home. Go watch another IEM video. It's done. That's the entire video. What more do you want?